My name is Sidney Francis Smith III. This lecture will be in applied philosophy. You learn what you are taught, and you teach what you have learned. Now, if that happens to be a fallacy, that will continue through generations. My grandmother was taught that there are three basic shapes. There's circles, triangles, and squares. I was taught that. My granddaughter with Mickey Mouse Club was taught that. Reality is, after sitting through a demonstration with Buckminster Fuller, I found out that a square is not a basic shape. A square is nothing more than a series of triangles. So, looking for the rule of three, I tried to figure out, okay, what could be the third basic shape? And it has to be a cone. A cone can't be made with triangles, and a cone can't be made with circles. A cone is a combination of both of them. Now, if you draw a line around a cone all the way down to the bottom and look straight down at the apex, you wind up with a spiral. Okay, now into some basic physics. We have energy, motion, and interaction. If I take two hoses of water and aim them at each other, the pattern that's created is a divergent pattern, a splashing. But if I take the same two hoses of water and just change their vector, their direction, I can combine them into a single stream. Now that also works with photon-electron interactions. It also works with Republicans and Democrats. It doesn't matter. Any opposition, if you change the vector, can be combined into a single stream. Now, Polanyi, a Hungarian mathematician, philosopher, came up with this idea that there is a vector to information, always from tacit to explicit. You have your input, thousands of things are grabbing for your attention at all times, such as the weight of your body on your feet. I have just made that hierarchy and you just felt it. Okay. Now, here comes the input. I get the idea. We get the process. It now goes into the output. You can't have a tacit action, and you can't have an explicit action without a tacit beginning. You have to have the idea first before you can make it onto the output. Now, there was a research surgeon who had patients that had grand mal seizures every 10 minutes. I mean, it was a ridiculous amount, and they had no life whatsoever. So he did this radical operation where he separated the corpus callosum from right hemisphere from the left hemisphere. Now, Robert Ornstein, who is a research psychologist, says, I got a new toy. Nobody's ever had this done before. So he starts doing a series of exercises to see how did they actually think different, the two different brains. And what he came up with is that here comes the input. The right hemisphere is basically expansive in thought. I mean, this is overview. It's basically expansive in thought. It goes to the process of reduction to the contraction of thought to the output. Okay, so input, expansion, process, contraction, output. By the way, Speary, who is Dr. Speary, who is the one who did the operation, won the Nobel Prize for it. Now, I had this idea. We've all heard the phrase, east is east, west is west, and never the twain shall meet. And I said, why? So then I got into it. Okay, we have two polar opposites in cultures. We have classic America circa 1952. We have classic China, which is about 2,500 years ago, when they were the top of the pool. Now, we in the West have a phonetic language, which is sounds, with each letter is a sound. Now, I can give you a book in French, and you could read the letters, but you don't know what the meaning is. We also have a linear time sense. First three words in the Bible, in the beginning. If there's a beginning of time, there's the end of time, alpha to omega. China, 2,500 years ago, had a cyclic understanding of time, the dragon chasing its tail, the life-death cycle. History was recorded as a circle. The government oppressing the people giving rise to new government, which then in turn oppresses the people. Now that circle may be 400 years, but it's still considered a circle. And their language is a pictographic language, is processed in the right hemisphere. We know this from brain damage victims. A brain damage victim from the West, he catches it in the left hemisphere, and he can't read its language. Conversely, someone from China is hit in the right hemisphere in basically the same position. They can't read their language, but the Westerners can still read theirs in the same damaged area. So now, within the culture itself, we tend to be a left hemisphere culture. We are a logic-based culture. We're an output. What is out here is what's real. Our most heralded citizens are the logic thinkers, the hedge fund managers, the lawyers, all of these people, the businessmen. They're the most heralded citizens, and the lowest denominator in our culture are the artist poets. Conversely, China, 2,500 years ago, their most heralded citizen was the artist poet. Lao Tzu wrote a book called the Book of Tao, and it changed the course of Chinese history with a 3,000-word poem. They were much more right hemisphere dominant as a culture. The lowest rung in their hierarchy was the businessman logic thinker. They didn't count. So they didn't give a lot to the output. Theirs was basically what goes on internally. So then I wind up down in the jungles in Mexico. I was looking at Mayan sun art, and I'm sitting in Polanyi, and I'm looking at a glyph, a hieroglyphic, and this glyph had a stylized profile of a face, and he had little doodles in front of him. So I'm looking at it and looking at it, and all of a sudden I realized these are modifiers to that picture. And then every glyph that I saw after that had a picture and had a suffix, a prefix, or both. So those were modifiers. In order to read their language, both hemispheres had to fire simultaneously. The pictures are firing the right hemisphere, and the modifiers are firing in the left hemisphere. So, being a bashful person, I found out that the Mesa Rotonda, which is the grand meeting of all people doing research. Every year they go to Palenque and they have the round table. And the woman who runs it lived in Palenque. So I go knocking on her door. Hi, what's the Mayan symbol of time? And she said the caracol, the snail shell, linear in direction, cyclic in motion. It's a helix, okay, which is the combination of these two. So, let's say you get an idea. The idea is you go out and you buy the tennis shoes, the shorts, the shirt, the hat, and the racket. You want to be a tennis player, right? And you go out and you start learning the individual parts of playing tennis. And after the first day you come back and, oh man, I don't want to do that, you know. Or, yeah, I like that. And so you go back and you repeat that. And you keep circling back and forth, reaffirming your idea that you want to do this. All of a sudden, there'll be a moment where you're not thinking of either. You just play. And then somebody does something that you've never seen before, and you realize there is a next level of learning that needs to happen. In the West, we learn learning blocks of information. You need the learning blocks of information to get to the concept. How many times have you heard that? That's the way you got to have those building blocks of information to get the concept, which is diametrically opposed to how the brain actually works. So instead of this partial understanding as you build the parts, partial understanding of the concept, the real pattern of learning is a helix. Starting at the first time you've gone out, you start doing the exercises and what have you, and all of a sudden you get that breakthrough point. Now I really like it, and so you continue and you learn that much more information to get to the next breakthrough point. Now you really got into it and you want to go into semi-pros, and you got to gather that much more information. Now you want to go into the pros, you got to come all the way out here to get to that level of the breakthrough, to be able to play in the pros. So that's the idea. This is the structure of how I came about with this idea, and then wound up writing my own degree at Eckerd College. My committee was an artist, a physicist, and a philosopher, and used all three disciplines woven around light, using this structure as my minor, which is in epistemology. How do we learn? So now I go into the school system with them 2 NEA grants. And it was 2 years in a row. I taught 100 kids, 100 fifth graders. And the first thing I did was I taught them all how to draw in 3D. And each one of these exercises, you repeat the exercises several times, and you'll understand how to do straight lines that get smaller, little balls, S-curves, blocks in space, Stonehenge, inside of a room, and an open field. Then I start my lectures. Once they learn this, because all my lectures are in 3D drawings with the actual word. So that, like, this is an interior of an ion laser, and there's one glass tube inside of another glass tube. The carbon discs that are inside of that, the water that surrounds that, and the electromagnets that surround that push that into the center, push the argon molecule into the center. The argon molecule swells with energy and releases, when it hits its saturation point, it releases the energy as 99% heat and 1% light. It bounces through the polarized mirrors, comes out through the Brewster window, and that is lased light. It's in phase and coherent, meaning in phase, they're all the wavelengths are moving together. Coherent is that it's super tight. I can run it off the planet. Now, I got the kids to role play this. And I had them line up, and some were the electromagnets, and gently pushing into the center, the argon molecule. He would swell up and he would release, and out would come another student who becomes the lased light, bounces off the polarized mirrors, gets in alignment, and becomes the photon, a laser photon, in phase and coherent. Then, the third part of the lecture, I bring in a laser. And I use chalk dust and bounce it off the mirrors and show them how that works. So this is my lesson in lasing. The next lecture, I did a whole series of lectures, but I'm just giving a demonstration of these 2 lectures that I did. The next lecture was on sundials. Now, sundials, at the beginning of the class, I stuck a stick in the ground. I put a rock at the end of the shadow, and we went inside. Inside the classroom, I had strung string all up and down and to the floor, creating shapes with this string. And the kids are having to step under and, to get into there. Then I'd say, okay, where's the next line go? And they'd point to the different positions in the room, and I'd say, oh, well, where's a tie up over there? Oh, let's put it over there, to up there, to down there, to over there. And we do that for a little bit. Then they take a break, I strip it all out. When they come back from break, I have a line attached to the light that comes right above a stick and ends right there. Then I have one kid has a protractor, about this size. And I have one kid on the floor with tape and the string, and I'm up on a ladder, and we say, okay, when's it hit 15 degrees? When it got to 15 degrees, we lock everything down. And we do this several times across. Now this is the sunlight pattern in the summer. Then I go to the light behind it, drive a line across the top of it. Because the angle is more shallow, I have a longer throw, and that's what sunlight looks like in the winter, because the sun is farther down and you get a longer shadow. At the end of the class, I come out, I put another rock at the end of the shadow, bring out the protractor, and there's 15 degrees. So that is one of my applications of using the theory. I thank you for your time.